Savage.
I'm not an ordinary talk show host. I'm not a guy who was a disc jockey who got lucky. Let's make this a vigorous discussion. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. You've got to do the right thing for humanity. Let's re-educate America. There is no separation of church and state in the Constitution. What is socialized medicine? It's a disaster. Let's show the Hollywood idiots that we have a brain. Red diaper doper babies. They're running the universities, they're running the journalism departments, and they're running the courts. How could this be happening to sane, normal, decent, patriotic Americans? I have been talking about borders, language, and culture ever since I began in the media. How can the listeners to the Savage Nation stop them from tearing our culture to pieces?
Savage.
Be here or be nowhere.
Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, and psychological nudity. Viewer discretion is advised.
You're watching MSNBC. Now, best-selling author and one of America's most popular radio personalities, Michael Savage, on the Savage Nation.
Hello, infidels, and welcome to another edition of the Savage Nation serial. Today is Flag Day. Flag Day. It's the anniversary of the official adoption of the Stars and Stripes as our nation's flag. It's also the 228th birthday of the United States Army. Now more than ever, we must respect our flag and what it represents and honor the brave men and women of our armed forces who are in fact fighting and dying for us now. So I can speak here and you can either hate me or love me. That's freedom. It's a world in chaos this week. Take a look at what's been going on. It's terrible. It's getting worse. The so-called roadmap to peace is turning out to be a roadmap to death, to holy war. I don't know who drew up the actual details of this map for the president, but I think President Bush needs a new cartographer. The big question is, how can you negotiate peace when one side, Israel, says, we don't like you, but we're willing to live with you? The other side says, we hate you, and we want to kill every last Jew. I have a great guest to discuss this and many other questions today on the Savage Nation. I don't know the solution over there, do you? There are other big stories making headlines in the Savage Times this week. For example, why do some New York teachers who have been accused of sexually harassing their students still have jobs? Well, it's a result of trickle-down immorality that started during the Clinton years. Trickle-down immorality. I'll tell you about that later on. I also have an astonishing guest with an incredible story. This is a first for television. No one has ever seen her before. She is dedicated to exposing covert terrorist cells all over the world. She's risked her life to go undercover. She has infiltrated radical Islamic groups in a burqa and a veil. And until recently, she had to keep her face hidden and her identity a secret. This is some brave lady. I've never met her. But she's going to come out in the open on this show. She's going to show her face. She's going to talk about her experiences. You can't miss that. This is bravery. Women will save America, not the men. The men are shot. They're too busy with sports, entertainment, and pornography. Women, listen to me carefully. We need you. There are some big new developments in the Martha Stewart saga. And I'll tell you why I still think, yeah, she's probably guilty of something, but the punishment should fit the crime, and I think Martha's getting a raw deal. And by the way, why is the liberal media praising Hillary Clinton so much? What did she do that was so great? All she did was write a book. And it's questionable whether she even did that. I'll tell you why everyone's ignoring the real issues that she's not talking about. I'd actually like to thank her, because since her book came out, sales of my book, The Savage Nation, have gone upwards all around America, except, of course, in the Porn Belt, where her book sells. Her book sells in the Porn Belt. My book is still selling in the Corn Belt. Ladies and gentlemen, if you saw, by the way, the show last week, you saw my Pinup Girl segment, where I talked about why the airbrushed photos you see in magazines damage our society by creating a false expectation for men and an impossible role for women. I actually agreed with the feminists on something. We've got such an outstanding response to that segment that I have decided to do it again. This week, though, I'll be talking about teenage role models. They're getting younger and younger. Why are they using girls 12, 13, 14 years old? Where is this going to end? In the cradle? And for your pleasure today, we went and got old editions of Playboy magazine, which we'll show you, and show you how innocent they were in the beginning and how unbelievably raw they are today. All this on the Savage Nation, as well as Savage's Hollywood idiot. Who do you think is going to win it this week? Here's a hint. This week's idiot hasn't had a hit in the U.S. for years. In the U.S., I said, which explains why he's sticking up for another country. You think you know who it is? Well, I'm not going to tell you. You have to guess who the idiot is this week. And remember, as always on my show, you're going to experience extreme psychological nudity. What does that mean? What, I just make it up for you? It means I strip away the veneer of deceit to bring you the naked reality of the liberal body politic. It isn't always pretty, but it's the savage truth. You've heard of reality TV? Well, the Savage Nation is as real as it gets. That's what psychological nudity is. And of course, write this number down, get online right now. I'll be taking your calls in the Savage Nation at 1-888-MSNBC USA. If you get on with me, you're going to reach more people with your statement than you'll meet for the rest of your life. That's amazing, right? That's the Savage Nation. Be here or be nowhere.
Savage.
With more bloodshed in Israel, is the roadmap to peace really a roadmap to holy war? Michael Savage talks with Joe Farah. Stay tuned.
This message should be sent for every Israeli. Your children and your women, your husbands, everybody is a target now.
Yeah, okay, that's it. That's a great way to live in peace, isn't it? Let's start with a caller quickly. James in Louisiana, what do you think about the Middle East? What should be done?
I think Israel should declare war on Palestine. I think it's been too long.
Just plain out go to war and get it over with.
They should go to war, they should take over Palestine, and then they should help rebuild them. But it's a small minority of militant groups that are causing all this trouble.
Well, thanks for the call. There are many opinions on this. In Israel, this has been one of the bloodiest weeks in recent memory, as you well know. 17 people dead so far and more than 100 wounded in a Jerusalem bus bombing. Let's pause right there. You know what a bus bombing means? Let's not run through this. These SOBs are targeting innocent women and children. They're putting nails and ball bearings in bombs to rip as much flesh to pieces. That's not humanity. That's not a human being. That's an animal. And what really gets me nuts is the way the story is being reported by the American liberal media, the same media supporting Hillary Clinton and her crap. First of all, I don't believe that the homicide bombers should be counted in the death toll of these attacks. They're subhumans. They're terrorist scum. They're not human beings once they do that. They're brainwashed robots. They're cyborgs. Don't give me the count of the bomber. This is what the liberal media does. 17 people died, including the suicide bombers. Shame on you in the liberal media. You are the reason that we have this problem in the world. You've done it to this country. You're doing it to Israel. You'll kill all of us with your insanity. Then Israel shoots rockets into Gaza to kill the militants. And what does the media do? It reports both stories as if they're equal, moral equivalence, just as they've been doing for years. The cop is equal to the rapist. So you don't know who's right and who's wrong. That's all part of the liberal plan to destroy America, destroy the world. You see the pictures of the weeping Palestinians all over TV, as if some low-life Hamas terrorist deserves the same attention as the innocent men, women, and children who died in that bus. There is no moral equivalence. Last week I showed you this map of worldwide hotspots. Let's take a look at it again. There are conflicts, if you look at the map, in Afghanistan, Bosnia, Chechnya, Cyprus, East Timor, Indonesia, Kashmir, Kosovo, Kurdistan, Macedonia, the Middle East, Nigeria, the Philippines, the Sudan, and Uganda. 15 big conflicts. What do these 15 conflicts all have in common? They all involve Muslims who can't get along with their neighbors. Follow the bouncing ball. Now, the anti-Israel liberals would say there'll be peace in Indonesia and everywhere else on earth if the Jews would only give back the West Bank. There'd be peace in all the places where Muslims hate the West if the Jews would only give back the West Bank. Do you actually believe that? Do you think there'd be peace between India and Pakistan? Do you think there'd be peace in Indonesia and the Philippines? I don't think so. Let's talk about the beliefs of the suicide bombers for a moment. They are brainwashed into thinking that after they die by killing other people's children, they get to rape 72 virgins in the next world. The reward for killing other people's children in this world is that you get to rape young girls in the next world. What does that say about the so-called religion of peace? We have to remember who was the terrorist and who was the terrorized. We have to make a distinction between the oppressor and the oppressed. The big question is, How do you broker a peace agreement when one side is willing to work out a solution and the other side wants the final solution? Joining me now to discuss this is the founder and president of WorldNetDaily.com, my good friend, Joseph Farah. Joseph, are you with us here on the Savage Nation?
Great to be with you, Michael. Sure am.
Well, Joe, this is a horrible week for the world and for humanity, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's been a bloody week, and we're going to see more of them as long as we're looking at this roadmap.
Yeah, what a roadmap, Joe. Who was the cartographer who came up with that idea?
Yeah, it's a roadmap to disaster is what it is, not to peace.
Joe, Israel apparently is willing to sort of bend over backwards to give peace a chance. That's what it looks like to me.
That's exactly right.
But the radicals inside the Palestinian movement are calling for the death of all Jews.
That's
now,
right.
Under these circumstances, Joe, how can this roadmap work, if at all?
It can't work, Michael. An analogy would be this. After September 11th, if we went into negotiations with Osama bin Laden to give him one of the states of the Union to control in exchange for peace, that is the equivalent of what we're asking Israel to do when we ask them to negotiate with people who only want their destruction.
Joe, can I ask something about your background? Aren't you an Arab Christian? Is that true?
Yes, I am. I'm Lebanese and Syrian American.
Well, I think that it's very important that people understand that not everybody of Arabic extraction, if you want to put it that way, or descent, is a suicide bomber. It sounds crazy to say, but you know, Joe, I have to ask you something. Is there moral equivalence between the two sides in this conflict? I don't think so. What about you?
Absolutely not. We've seen Israel over and over again negotiate away territory it has won from the Arabs in hard-fought, bloody victories, the Sinai, etc., and give them in negotiations to people that they believe to be honest peace partners. We don't have any honest peace partners for Israel to work with at this time.
Well, Abbas was presented as such, but apparently 2 weeks ago he said he will fight the radicals, that when he was given the hail and hello. Then all of a sudden last week he said he's not going to fight them. The next thing, the Israeli soldiers were killed in a setup. Israel struck back, then a suicide bombing went off. It's a nightmare. Now, Israel, Joe, has a powerful military and the power to end this conflict very quickly. Why don't they do it, Joe?
Israel has two things on its side, right and might. And ultimately, Michael, I believe that those are the two things it needs to rely on for peace in the Middle East. As long as it does this tit-for-tat retaliation back and forth, we are going to see this so-called cycle of violence continue. Ultimately, there has to be a decisive victory. That is the way Israel will achieve peace, the only way Israel will be able to achieve peace.
Joe, some people are saying that Israel is sort of a vassal state of the United States, which is why there's so much trouble over there. It's sort of a foothold for the West and Western civilization in the heart of the radical Muslim world. Do you believe Israel can survive 100 years from now, even if they were victorious over, let's say, Hamas today?
Yes, I do, Michael, for a number of reasons. Not only political reasons and military reasons, but spiritual reasons. I believe Israel's there for a reason. I believe that God wants them there. I believe a lot of Christians agree with me. I think it's one of the reasons Israel has such broad support in the United States is because of you know, the 30 or 40, 50 million evangelical Christians in this country who see Israel as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy.
If only the Jewish liberals saw it that way, we might be in good shape.
You got it.
Now, I'm serious about that. It's a nightmare that many liberals in this country fear the evangelical Christians more than they do Osama bin Laden. It just shows you, Joe, that in those cases, I think you'd agree with me that liberalism of that kind is a mental disease. It's not a philosophy. Quickly, Joe, don't you think the U.S. is applying a different standard to Israel than it does to itself? This really bothers me.
Absolutely. If you can imagine, after we've just successfully invaded Iraq and liberated it, after a few months ago we invaded Afghanistan, we went halfway around the world to fight terrorism when it came to our doorstep. Israel is fighting it in its backyard, and we're telling them to do it with one hand tied behind their back. It doesn't make sense.
I think Bush made a misstep this week when he chastised Israel, frankly. Look, Israel's not saintly. The people are not angels, but that's not the point. They shouldn't have been chastised the day before the bus went up in smoke. I have a terrible feeling about that. Joe Farah, WorldNet Daily. I read your site every day, particularly since you started putting my book up and since you published The Savage Nation. God bless you, man. I really, really want to thank you for coming out on this beautiful day to be with us on The Savage Nation.
Always a pleasure, Michael.
And I want everyone to understand WorldNet Daily is a very good newspaper on the Internet.
Well, keep up the good work.
Thank you, Joe. We'll talk about why the Arab world doesn't help to resettle the Palestinians, for example, and other topics. And remember, we have a woman coming up on The Savage Nation who has gone undercover in a burqa and a veil. She has video that you're not going to believe that was taken all over the world. She is a rich in spirit. She is a very brave woman. She has never been unmasked before. She will be unmasked for you on this show, an ordinary Saturday with an extraordinary program. Be here or be nowhere. I'm Michael Savage.
Savage.
Up next in the Savage Times, what recently happened to outraged World War II veterans? And later, a terrorist hunter tells her incredible story.
Another U.S. soldier died today on Flag Day. His clothing was found on the side of a lake in Iraq, and he was found dead in the water there. Young men are dying for this country, dying so I could be sitting here on this set today, and you could be listening to me. You got to understand what's at stake. And don't you let those liberals attack the military or the police. Stand up to them. They'll kill us all because they're mentally deranged. Welcome back to the Savage Nation. Let's look at the headlines in the Savage Times, the only newspaper that dares to bring you all the truth, well, that's not in print. In New York City, as I told you earlier, 4 teachers who were accused of acts such as sexual harassment for real, sexual abuse of special ed students, and paying students to engage in theft. Bad enough that the kids were exposed to this illness, but the fact that it was teachers doing it makes it even more disgusting. But that's not the half of it. The accused teachers went through an arbitration and were allowed to return to the classroom. And it gets even worse. The teachers in question are tenured. And under the twisted New York state law, that means they can refuse to answer questions about their actions while they're being investigated. Pretty neat, huh? Their tenure also prohibits them from being fired. Thank you very much, the NEA and the other teachers' unions. This means that 4 potential sex offenders are still working the school system, which can't even find out the extent of their actions because they don't have to talk about it if they don't want to. What kind of lessons will these kids learn from these teachers? Let's take a call. Well, we'll go to Pensacola, Florida. JT, you're on the Savage Nation. What's your topic, please?
Well, hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I was agreeing with you and stuff. I think we really need to go ahead and fence in all the Palestinians and stuff, and kind of do like you insist.
No, I didn't insist on it.
Oh, well.
I didn't make that point. Joe did, but I'm asking you, what is the answer here when one side says, I hate you and I will kill all of you, and the other side says, I hate you and I can live with you? How can you make peace in a situation like that when you have a mindset that's so distorted? Thank you. Nathan in Norman, Oklahoma, you're up on the Savage Nation. What's your topic, please?
Yes, my main problem here is just these Palestinians. They're uprooted and forced off their property, and it's really, well, what it comes down to is these men in these black suits carrying sticks. That's all it takes for them to get ratings.
I have no idea what you're talking about, sir, but may I ask you something? Do you know 911? Do you know how to dial 911, Norman? Because I suggest that you press 911 right now, and I'm sure that the police will be there to help you very shortly. Okay, they're all over the place. Men with sticks to get ratings. I guess he's talking about this stick. Yeah, and I'm getting ratings, Norman. In fact, I beat CNN last week, and I cut the audience for Fox in half. So thank you very much for listening, Norman. You're helping build the Savage Nation. This story really gets me angry, especially on this day, the 228th birthday of the United States Army. You ready for this one? Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, South Pacific, was the site of one of the most pivotal battles against the Japanese in World War II. And after Marines took the island, they built an airfield there. It was named Henderson Field after Major Lofton Henderson, a Marine pilot killed in action by the Japanese in World War II. Now, Henderson Field is now an airport for the Solomon Islands, which is a very popular destination for Japanese tourists. A Japanese consulting firm hired to renovate the airport is proposing to rename Henderson Field, get rid of it, after the Japanese national flower, the chrysanthemum. The Japanese consultants think a more modern name is needed to attract Japanese tourists. The Marines think otherwise. They say a name change would dishonor the Americans who fought and died there, and I think they're right. You know why? The Japanese lost the battle, they lost the war, and they should give up on this shameless attempt to rewrite history, which they're doing all over the map. Up in Canada, on another issue, liberal idiocy has reached a new high, or a new low, depending upon how you see it. This week, a court in Ontario ruled that Canada's ban on homosexual marriage was unconstitutional and changed the definition of marriage from a union between a man and a woman to the lawful union of two persons. Just hours after the ruling, 2 Canadian men were married in the country's first same-sex wedding. A homosexual lawmaker in Toronto said, "I really can't believe that we've reached this day." You know something? I really can't believe we've reached this day either. From same-sex marriage to deviant sex practices, more unbelievable sex news. The American Psychiatric Union, those are your shrinks, by the way, is trying to get people to believe that pedophilia, you know what that is? It's a perversion that makes adults want to have sex with children. They want to make that normal behavior. Let me say that again. An association of alleged medical professionals in the United States is trying to get people to accept that adults who have sex with children is acceptable and normal. You know what I say? All psychiatrists are crazy for belonging to the APA. If you are a conservative, decent, law-abiding American psychiatrist, rip up your APA card and leave it to the perverted wackos. Period. End of story.
She went undercover to expose terrorism. Now, for the first time, she's exposing her true identity. Rita Katz, the terrorist hunter. Up next on The Savage Nation. Monday at 10.
We support Bin Laden! We support Bin Laden! Bin Laden! Bin Laden! Bin Laden! Bin Laden! Bin Laden! We support Bin Laden! Support Bin Laden! What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? Jihad! 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 Jihad!
Yeah, that's America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Welcome back to the Savage Nation. The video you just saw was shot at a rally outside the United Nations, undercover. The people, if you're deaf, were chanting, "We support Bin Laden," and what do we want? Jihad. They're calling for attacks on the United States for the conversion and death of Christians and Jews. This video was made in April of '01, 5 months before 9/11. Think about that. This was the call for terrorism and death right out in the open in the United States, months before the most devastating terror attack in American history. How did the FBI miss this signal? You've heard the names Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad. If you think these terrorist organizations are all based in distant Middle Eastern countries, I'm afraid you are deadly wrong. These enemies are here now. They're operating on a large scale in our country, right under our noses. My next very special guest has made it her mission to expose the workings of these terrorists. She's an Iraqi-born Jewish woman who risked her life over and over again to go undercover and infiltrate radical Islamic groups to gather evidence against them. She is the director of an organization called SITE, the Search for International Terrorist Entities, and she's written an incredible book about her experience called Terrorist Hunter. Till very recently, she had to hide. She kept her identity a secret under a burqa. She never appeared in public. This book was written as anonymous, and she would only appear on television in disguise. But today, she decided to unmask for the Savage Nation. Her name is Rita Katz, and here she is appearing on television for the first time since she revealed herself as the author of Terrorist Hunter. Rita, thanks for joining me on the Savage Nation.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you're a brave woman. I've said 100 times the women are going to be the ones to have to save this country. The men are asleep. How entrenched is Islamic fundamentalism in America, Rita?
Islamic fundamentalism in the United States has been in this country for many, many, many years. They have been able to infiltrate this country from Hezbollah to Al-Qaeda, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, in every corner of our cities, of our great cities. And that's why I decided actually to write the book, because I want the American public to understand that the Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic terrorism is not something to be in the Middle East only, or in Afghanistan or in Saudi Arabia like we experienced last attack, but it's here in everyone's backyard, and we need to be aware to what's going on in this country.
Well, how do these groups get away with it? I thought after 9/11 with the Patriot Act that the FBI has infiltrated groups like these. Are they still operating?
A lot of them are still operating. It's not easy to crack them down. It's true that after 9/11, the FBI, the Bush administration, all the government agencies are trying to crack down every Islamic terrorist cell in the country. However, there is a very big problem of how you identify such a cell. And the government, many of the government agencies do not have the experience of how to deal with Islamic terrorism. It's not a criminal investigation.
Wait a minute, so you're saying that these government bureaucrats are afraid of offending them because of their religious beliefs, afraid of losing their pension and their job, so they're looking the other way? Is that what you're really saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in order to investigate and crack down the right cells, you need to have the knowledge of how Islamic fundamentalism operates. The fact that Islamic terrorism has established front groups in the U.S. You will not, for instance, I always claim that Hamas and the Islamic terrorist organization fundraising the U.S. and found the U.S. as one of the major sources for financing their activities. You are not going to find a check from certain activists, a check that goes directly to Al-Qaeda or a check that goes directly to Hamas. You need to identify the front groups, and that's something...
But Rita, wait a minute. The FBI broke the mafia in this country. They know about buffers, they know about front groups, they know about front organizations, they know about bars and restaurants. Surely they're sophisticated enough to know the same thing about terrorist organizations, aren't they?
Well, Islamic terrorism is something new to this country. It's something that, although it happened the first time in 1993, the FBI did not understand the first World Trade Center bombing in 93. They didn't understand that that was part of a largest conspiracy. That was actually Al-Qaeda attack. They investigated that attack as just another criminal investigation. They found those that committed the crime, and they put them in behind bars. But
Rita, tell me about, I want to play a tape of Dr. Al-Moody. Time is short, and this is very important.
I can't hear him.
Let's play Dr. Al-Moody right now on the Savage Nation. Let the American people see this one. Chilling, absolutely chilling. Tell me about this videotape that you shot. On the tape, Dr. Al-Moody expresses support for Hamas and Hezbollah, but the same man had dined at the White House and the Justice Department, Rita. How could this happen?
And that's exactly one of the points that I'm trying to make in the book, that calling for support for terrorist organization is something that we are not allowed to afford ourselves. Abdurrahman al-Amoudi was, like you said, a permanent visitor to the White House, was among the mainstream leaders in this country. However, he expressed his support to Hamas and Hezbollah. If I hadn't shot that video, I guess that we could have still seen him as a permanent visitor to the White House.
Where is he now? Where is this doctor today?
He is in the Washington, Virginia area, continuing with his regular businesses, I guess. He doesn't report to me, let's put it this way.
So it's perfectly fine in America to support a terrorist group as long as you don't engage in terrorist activities. Is that the law?
The law is that you are not allowed to provide any material supporting to terrorist organization. But what I'm trying to say is that by expressing such a support by a Muslim leader who actually has more power than just somebody from the public, just nobody, standing there in front of the White House and expressing his support, forget about Hamas, Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization that after Al-Qaeda killed the highest number of Americans. How can you allow
So I don't know how they're allowed to function in America. I have no idea how a country can survive that has laws like this. I mean, freedom should have its limitations. Otherwise, we're going to all go down together. What role does Saudi Arabia play in these terror networks, Rita?
Saudi Arabia plays very, very important role. And one of the points that I'm trying to make in my book, and I hope that the American people will understand it more and more, and maybe the administration, is Saudi Arabia is the major source for funding jihad, for educating the new generations for jihad and preaching for jihad. Without Saudi Arabia, Islamic terrorism would not have existed the way it is today. Just look, for instance, 15 of the hijackers were Saudis. After that, after 9/11, I opened their textbooks because as someone who came from Israel, was raised in Israel many years, I could somehow, you know, the suicide bombers of Hamas fit the profile of a suicide bomber. They are under occupation, they are very poor. But why would 15 hijackers
I don't know.
who are from Saudi...
What can we do? Break off relations with Saudi Arabia? I want to play the video of the UN rally for a moment. That's shocking. I've got to see this video. Can you play that again? This has got to be seen again. I don't believe this. Now wait, you'll see a cop walk by. I want you to see this part of it. Wait, in a minute you're going to see a New York cop walk by. Freedom. Isn't freedom great in America? Don't you love it? Don't you just love? Look, everyone's rushing off to buy a hot dog. Isn't that great? The guy's calling for their death and destruction. This is before 911. This schmuck's going by for a hot dog. There, look at this. Look. Isn't freedom great? Now, Rita, this video was shot by a member of your organization.
Right.
When rallies like this were going on in public before 9/11, how come the FBI didn't take action? We only have less than a minute.
Well, they said it's freedom of speech. People can say whatever they want.
Rita, I'm sorry, we're out of time. Your book is unbelievable. Oh, we got a little time. Stay with it. That's freedom of speech. Wait a minute. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't call for the death and destruction of a nation, or can you?
You cannot. You, as a leader or as a community, you cannot call for violence activities. You cannot call, if you want to live in this great country, then live and support it. That's okay. You can disagree with many of the things that we want, but you cannot call for jihad, or calling for the others, the death of others.
All right, well, thank God we have a little bit of a law left in this nation. Rita, since you've unmasked yourself, what are your plans now that you've come out in the open? Aren't you a target for these groups?
I'll tell you this way. I don't think that many people are going to love me after reading my book. I prefer to stay as anonymous, but since I am out there, I'm going to try and take...
Well, wait, who made you take off your anonymous garb? Who made you? Who sued you to force you to show your identity?
The groups that I uncovered some of their operation.
What? You're telling me the Islamic terrorist groups sued in an American court to make you show your face? That's the world I'm living in?
Yes. Yes, because I guess that one of the reasons was that, you know, by filing such a lawsuit, I will have to expose myself and
So, Rita, in other words, they're smart enough to use the law to kill us in this country. Is that it, Rita?
I can tell you this much, that I hope to learn about them a lot by filing this lawsuit. Did I answer the question?
I don't believe what I just heard. Did they use American lawyers? Maybe from NYU, some red diaper doper babies? Did they use ACLU lawyers? Because you are the type that will destroy this country. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
You're a brave woman. The cat says we'd have an America. Thanks for sharing your story today in the Savage Nation. I'm in a sweat. I need a break. I'll be right back. I don't believe it.
Martha or Hillary? Which one is the real...
Sorry for Monica Lewinsky.
You know, I feel sorry for everyone who was caught up in this relentless partisan investigation. I think it was...
What about her in particular?
Absolutely.
You feel sorry?
Absolutely.
She was a victim too, in a way.
Absolutely.
So this would be president. Nothing about the crimes that they were accused of or they actually committed. All about his affairs and her victimhood. It's disgraceful what the liberal media does to the American mind, whatever's left of it. And we'll go to the follow-up on the two powerful women who have been in the news this week. But first we'll go to Jake in Huntsville. Jake, you're on the Savage Nation. Topic, please. Go ahead.
Yes, Michael, my beef with Hillary is mainly this. She doesn't even talk about Judith Nayland, that woman he was accused of raping, in her book.
I don't care about Bill's sex. Does that really interest you? I don't give a damn what he did with women.
I know, but...
I care about what policies they enacted and the policies that weakened America, which you're going to see on a graphic in a minute. How could the liberal media let her get away with talking about sex, and her victimhood without asking her a thing about the reality of what went on. I don't understand that. These people can get up in the morning and shave. I don't know how they do it.
Well, I mean...
all right. That's the whole story. Jack, New Orleans, what do you want to talk about? You're on the Savage Nation.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, this is Captain Charlie from New Orleans.
And what's on your mind?
I was sitting here I saw your video here about these Al-Qaeda guys or whoever they are here with their little hate speech. I think they ought to deport them guys in a pine box, but that's not why I called. What I called for was, you know, if I don't care if Hillary Clinton was president, if you had Mexicans or Canadians walking across the border with bombs strapped to their butts blowing us up, how long do you think we would put up with that before we went over there and totally annihilated them?
You mean you're comparing that to Israel?
Right. Yeah, how long do you think we would put up with that?
Probably a long time, because the ACLU would say that it's simply a choice to put dynamite on your body, and that they've been oppressed, and that they have to express their oppression.
Yeah, hey,
and then the ACLU would come to your town and tell you that if you even expressed your thought, yet you're a racist pig. We're going to lose this country, not because of men like you who still have the guts to say what you think, but because of those pinko lizards from New York City who are polluting the mind in the courtrooms of America.
Listen,
and I better stop right here. I better stop right here. I'll tell you what I really think. So Hillary Clinton thinks Monica Lewinsky was a victim. Very noble, Hillary. But who's the bigger victim? Let's look at the numbers. Hillary's big over... You know what? Let's skip right through this. I want to go right away because we're going to get very, very... Let's forget Monica. Let's forget Barbara. I don't care what the public thinks. Let's get that graphic off. I want to go to the 10 crimes of the Clintons. That's what I want to sink my teeth into. It's from my book, The Savage Nation. And that's what's really important. Now, these are what I call the 10 crimes that were committed during the Clinton regime. In my book, The Savage Nation, I've listed the 10 crimes committed against America during the Clinton years. Larry King didn't ask about him. Barbara Walters didn't ask about him. None of the other liberal phonies asked about him, and they have a right to ask about him for your sake. 1. This happened. Chinese military operatives stole, bought, or were given the jewels of our nuclear secrets. Pause right there. The Chinese were launching rockets that were crashing on their pads until the Clinton administration permitted them to gain the knowledge they can now aim nuclear weapons to our West Coast. Larry King! 2, illegal immigrants from all over the world broke through our borders under the Clintons. 3, homosexual radicals were allowed to attack America's children. Think about the Boy Scouts. 4, leftist radicals were permitted to falsely accuse our police. 5, Islamo-fascists entered our country through a de facto open border policy. Under Hillary, the ACLU was permitted to steal the votes of 6 million Californians who wanted to eliminate free medication and free education for illegal aliens who don't belong here, who should have been deported. All under the Clinton administration, which liberalized everything. 7. And this is a heartbreaker for those of you who believe in God. The ACLU, under the Clintons, was encouraged to drive Christianity out of our churches, prayer off playing fields, baby out of wombs, and pornography into every home. Good job, NYU. 8, babies near birth were slaughtered and their body parts sold for profit. You know, George Bush, God bless him, just got rid of this horrible crime of infanticide. Bill Clinton vetoed that, meaning he let it happen. You didn't hear a word of that, did you? 9, innocent Serbian children were bombed and killed in a phony wag the dog war. 10, the Fourth Amendment under Hillary was thrown out so Elian Gonzalez's door could be kicked in without due process. Remember the machine gun photo? Where did that photo go of the crying little boy, the unarmed fisherman, and the jackbooted thug? Why doesn't the media show you that picture? Because that picture typifies the Clinton administration. If Hillary wants to be president, she is going to have to address these charges, even though her liberal media buddies won't do it. But the real crime is that Hillary gets a free ride while Martha Stewart, who deserves better, is being set up for a fall. Look at what happened this week to her friend Sam Waxel, the former CEO of Imclone. Mr. Waxel was sentenced to more than 7 years in prison and ordered to pay $4.3 million in fines and back taxes after he's found guilty of securities and bank fraud, etc., etc., etc. I am not saying he is innocent, but he took a cancer drug to the market, which is now saving lives. And I believe that the punishment of Sam Waksal does not fit the crime. This is an overzealous, media-hungry prosecutor who is also going after Martha Stewart. It's the prosecutor who ought to be in the docket, not Martha Stewart. The punishments don't fit the crime. Ken Lay of Enron, where is he? He almost took the entire U.S. economy down. Why is he still riding around on the golf course? Ask yourself that question. Think about it. Yeah, America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. He pled the fifth. Okay. When I come back on the Savage Nation, the Hollywood idiot, be here or be nowhere.
Savage. Young females bear all. And for what? Michael Savage tells you why these sexy images are not so sexy at all. Next on the Savage Nation.
Look, before we go on to the pinups, I want to tell you something. Those 10 things must not be forgotten. Tomorrow is Father's Day. You know what you can do for yourself? Get a copy for free. I don't care. Go to a bookstore and write them down because you've got to get them. Page 200 in the Savage Nation. I want you to understand we're facing a very serious problem in this country with the government media complex covering up those 10 crimes of the Clintons. And now on to the story that you've all been waiting for, which is sex. I understand that. We all love sex. And, of course, we are Americans. That's all we can talk about. Last week on the show, I talked about my plan to end terrorism. I said that America has too much permissiveness and too much sex, and most of the Islamic nations have none. So my plan, jokingly, was to give them a small taste of freedom. I suggested dropping bottles of booze like this, pan to the bottles of booze like this, over the Islamic nations, right, and Playboys, drop them from airplanes over the Islamic nations. Just think of what would happen if a guy is in the desert saying, jihad, jihad, and a bottle of this comes down. Manna from heaven, and then he opens up one of these. Then maybe he would stop wanting to kill and waiting for the virgins in the next world. Maybe he'd get serious about this world. But there is a more serious issue here, and that's the unreality that these magazines present. I'm opposed to this unrealistic, idealized version of the female form. I think it brainwashes men into believing that any woman who doesn't look just like these softcore porno photos isn't good enough. And here's an early one from the 50s when Hugh Hefner first started out, okay? And then, of course, it got raunchier and raunchier. I'm not going to show you the raunchy ones on the Savage Nation, but the more recent ones, as you well know, I'm not going to show you anything graphic. You can see how the covers changed. Suddenly it was gynecological and obstetric instead of simply love. I also think these magazines make women feel inadequate and unable to compete with the images they see. It intimidates them. It intimidates men. Last week I showed you some examples of the changing female body image through the years. This week we're going to change it a bit. Let's look at these pictures again. And some of you may not have heard of these girls, but trust me, your kids have. So let's start in the past. Who's this one? I don't know who it is. That's a 40 star. Betty Grable, that's Betty Grable. Let's see the next one. Let's see the next pinup. Who's this?
Marilyn.
That's Marilyn Monroe? Okay, well, okay. Little meat on the bone. Jane Mansfield, I think that. Yes, keep going. Come on, let's pilot them through the, who's this? A Vargas girl. They started to create fantasy women. Who's this, guys? You know who this is. Twiggy? Now with Twiggy. Now it's getting to the unisexual image so that she appeals to nobody. I don't know who these girls are. I have no idea. But the point is that we're moving on and on and on, and suddenly we're getting up to the young ones. Watch what happens. Who's this? I don't know who they are. How can I remember all that? Yeah, we got to go to the Hollywood idiot. The point is that they're getting too sexy too soon. Let's move on to the Hollywood idiot so we have time to present him. Now, we got to get to him right away. Here it comes, the Hollywood idiot of the day. And now it is the moment you've all been waiting for, the immensely popular, world-famous, and legendary part of the show that I call Savage's Hollywood Idiot. Who will it be this week? Let's see. This week's idiot is an over-the-hill nebbish who hasn't had a hit in years in this country, which could be because he hasn't made a good film in years, which might be because he insists on casting himself as the leading man opposite sexy young actresses who have to pretend they find them attractive, right? Sounds like his marriage. But the reason he's this week's idiot is because he's recently become a salesman. He's become a salesman for France, where people still think he's talented. Now, that says something about French taste. His name is Woody Allen. He says he wants Americans to put their differences with the French to rest because he's tired of calling them freedom fries. I guess he's forgotten the price we pay for freedom in this country, a price the French weren't willing to meet. Now, Woody Allen is this week's Hollywood idiot. The question is, why do the French love him? I'll tell you that next week on The Savage Nation. Bye-bye. I'm not an ordinary talk show host. I'm not a guy who was a disc jockey who got lucky. Let's make this a vigorous discussion. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. You've got to do the right thing for humanity. Let's re-educate America. There is no separation of church and state in the Constitution. What is socialized medicine? It's a disaster. Let's show the Hollywood idiots that we have a brain. Red, diaper, doper babies. They're running the universities, they're running the journalism departments, and they're running the courts. How could this be happening to sane, normal, decent, patriotic Americans? I have been talking about borders, language, and culture ever since I began in the media. How can the listeners to the Savage Nation stop them from tearing our culture to pieces?
Savage.
Be here or be nowhere.
Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, and psychological nudity. Viewer discretion is advised.
You're watching MSNBC. Now, best-selling author and one of America's most popular radio personalities, Michael Savage, on The Savage Nation.
Hey, hey, hey. Hello, infidels, and welcome.